Cool. So hi guys, I'm Ian. This is Dylan. We're both from Abacus. So we're going to be talking about blockchain identity and KYC today. So first, how many of you guys have heard of Abacus before? Oh, so actually a lot more than I thought. Cool. Well, part of what we do is identity verification for people. So one of the things we really focus on is identity because it's really important to the applications we're doing. So Abacus is an identity and compliance platform for security tokens. So we do identity verification of people's identities. So for example, if you're trying to issue a security token, you need to KYC or AML your customers. Like you need to make sure they're not on watch lists. You need to make sure they are accredited for certain types of regulations. We also do the compliance. So we do issuance restrictions like Reg D, Reg S, and transfer restrictions on secondary transfer like Rule 144. So our first product we launched like about a month ago was Abacus Identity, which is an identity verification system for blockchain. So there's a lot of identity verification systems out there like Untitled or Verify Investor. They don't actually link your blockchain identity to your real identity. So what we did was we basically have a blockchain protocol called the Abacus protocol, where it's just a key value mapping that maps an address to, for example, a key would be like has passed Abacus KYC, and the value would be a Boolean. So this is useful for transfer restrictions and tokens. So I'm going to do a quick demo of what this exactly is. Okay, so you can either sign in with MetaMask to link your existing Ethereum address, or you can use email if you don't already have an Ethereum address. So we found that a lot of investors don't actually have MetaMask on their computers, and if they do have MetaMask, they don't actually want to use MetaMask to hold like their securities, because it's not like they don't think that web browsers are the most secure. So we basically made like a managed wallet for them. So you click Start Verification. And what this is doing is it creates an account for you, if the internet's working. Okay, the internet's kind of slow today, but basically the idea is that this will create an account for you, and then we'll use OAuth to basically get your information. So let's say you're participating in like a sale of, let's say like company A token, or like cross ventures. Let's say you're trying to invest in their like fund, like they're trying to raise a fund and you want to like put some money into it. So the idea is that you'd use Abacus to log in and you'd share existing information such as your email, your phone, and our identity verification reports. And we basically have an OAuth API to let these people actually access this data. And we write attestations of the blockchain so that this person's token has transfer restrictions on it, and they're able to make sure that they're enforced. Cool, so that is Abacus. So now let's talk about identity. So what is identity on the blockchain? You can break it down into two problems. One is identity, like basically the idea that one entity is one blockchain entity. So an entity can be a person, that's one you guys are probably most familiar with, or it could be a business. For example, like a business might have multiple people owning it, so you might need a multi-sig contract to actually represent the beneficial owners. And claims. So you basically want to write attestations about a wallet, make sure that it's passed certain checks to actually transfer to it. For example, like KYC checks, just know that like this person is, like you actually have this person's information that they're on your whitelist, or accreditation checks to make sure that they're actually allowed to invest in an offering. So how are non-person entities represented? So we represent them as multi-sig wallets, and we have basically a flow to in our UI to represent them. Dylan can talk more about that.
Yeah, so the way we have it set up is basically, in order for someone to do an NT-KYC, for example, for like a trust or a company, one person will have to go in and basically start the verification process. And so they like have a bunch of documents they upload relating to the entity, such as like the articles of incorporation. And then they add all the beneficiary owners, which are basically people with like significant amount of stake or, yeah, just like significant people within that entity. And so like similar to like creating like an organization on GitHub or something like that, basically just like add a bunch of people's names and emails, and they'll all get sent emails like saying that they need to basically verify themselves individually. So like they'll have to do their own individual KYC in order for the entity itself to be KYC'd. And then like within this like entity system, people are like, you can have like different roles. So like some people will be able to manage what goes in and out of the wallets, things like that.
Cool. So to talk a little bit more about like what identity is, right? So identity means that a wallet can be authenticated by multiple addresses. For example, if I have a phone and I have like a desktop wallet, but I also have like a cold wallet, they should all link to the same identity in theory, especially for like KYC, right? You need to know, like you want to know that this person has your tokens, but you don't want this person to authenticate 3 times on 3 separate wallets. It's just not good for UX. And on top of that, it's annoying because the person would have to re-verify every single wallet. So that's a really important part of identity. Also, signing a message in one key should work on all keys. If I sign a message in my mobile wallet, I should be able to, it should have the same validity as my desktop wallet because it's from the same person. And also, you should be able to revoke these keys. So if for some reason one of my wallets gets hacked, like I shouldn't have to compromise all of my assets across all of my wallets and all the blockchains I'm on. So that's another reason why identity is important. And for claims, so the basic idea behind claims is an issuer makes a statement about a subject. For example, I'm Abacus, and this person, and you have gone through my KYC checks. That would be an example of a claim. And you want to be able to read this information on a blockchain or read it off-chain and make sure that someone has actually said what they, like that claim is valid. Yeah, and claims are very important for security tokens. Okay, so some types of claims. I think the one everyone's most familiar with is KYC AML. So this is needed for FinCEN and OFAC compliance. So KYC means know your customer. You basically need to know who you're transacting with. And you can't have random people buying your token. So this information usually has to be, the actual name, address, date of birth usually has to be stored off-chain because you don't want to actually expose your details on-chain and have it permanently there. And yeah, we provide an OAuth API to actually access that information. And there's also AML, which is anti-money laundering. What that means is, like, if I'm, like, you don't want to do, like, you don't want to deal with like an arms dealer or someone who is a terrorist. So if you break KYC AML regulations, you're usually going to go to jail. So you probably don't want to do that. And there's also accredited investor checks. So in the US, to be an accredited investor, you have to either have a net worth of $1 million or have annual income of, I think, 200K. So that's required for a lot of types of issuances in the US, specifically Reg D 506C. That's the big one that people are talking about. Reg D in general needs it, but for accredited investor checks, you actually need someone to go and verify things. And people are doing this today with whitelists. But everyone's whitelist is a little different. So some people just, basically we need to come up with a standard whitelist that everyone can use. So let's talk a little bit about the standards out there for these problems. So there's 2 big ones for identity. I think ERC 725 is like the most popular one. The idea behind that is that you have a smart contract that is your identity. And then you have multiple people that are authorized to perform actions with that smart contract. So, for example, like basically you'll have an identity contract, and if you have like your mobile, desktop, cold wallet, you can give your mobile and desktop wallet a certain like permission, like master key, or maybe you can give your mobile wallet like a very specific permission, like it can only perform certain types of transactions. So that's what ERC 725 is. ERC 1056 is a little different. So the idea is that you have, like, by default, you have an identity. You don't need to create a smart contract. But then you can have another, or if you have 2 separate addresses, you can have an address delegate the identity to another address. So that basically any attestations made on that one address are valid for any address. Maybe I should get that whiteboard to draw. You want to set it up? Thanks. So yeah, I'll draw it out in a bit. But those are the identity standards. And the claim standards out there, there's ERC 735, which is, actually, I'll just draw out the thing first. Yeah. You see all kind of that? Oh, that's a good. I think this room's small. I don't really need it blank. So, yeah, ERC 725. The idea is that you have like a person that's represented by a contract, right? And then your keys have different levels of permissions, but they're all associated contracts. So this like might have permission level 1, and this is like your mobile wall, so that have permission level 2. So this is 725. So 1056, right? By default, you have an identity, right? So you have an address, right? And if you have a second address, basically you can point to this first address, and this is representative. So when you're making claims, you basically make claims on this contract. You go through these things. And now I'll talk a little bit about the claim standards. So ERC 735. So 735 was made by the same guy that made 725, the guy who made ERC 20. But the idea behind it is that when you have the contract, right, you write the claims on the contract. So let's say I'm like Abacus, right? I write the claim onto the contract, and the contract stores the actual information about the claim. So the downside to this is that if I'm Abacus, I need to have permission to write this claim to this wallet. And I can't write it directly. Normally, the person who owns the contract has to write it. But with 780, the way this works is that it's basically just a key value mapping. So if I have a attestation like this KYC, I can put a Boolean like yes. And anyone can write to this thing. And basically, there's another key over here, which is the issuer. And the issuer is, you can look up the claim made by the issuer. And this is also Does anyone have any questions, by the way? I think I might be,
Yeah, one quick question. I can really see the value of those claims in the future. As it stands now, one financial institution is liable for the claims, even though Abacus might pass your KYC checks.
Yeah.
Are there any protocols that are about capturing the data so that the user doesn't have to resubmit the data to every platform?
Yeah, for sure. So to resubmit the data, I don't think there's any off-chain protocols out there for doing that. The protocols like for Ethereum are all like on-chain, and you can see who's made claims about what. So Alex from Coinbase just talked about how Coinbase has like this OAuth system, so it will be able to share data in some way. We have a system like that too, where someone could if someone else wants to perform an identity verification, they can use OAuth to basically get the data from our databases if the person requests it, and they could submit that through their own identity checks to make sure someone's valid. So I guess the way that like all these protocols work is that KYC is kind of, or like identity verification is kind of like a trust matrix, multiple people attest like the same type of claim, for example, like has passed this KYC check, and if you have enough of these checks, then you seem more legitimate. Any more questions?
So KYC is usually common four steps, right?
Yeah.
Like gathering data, checking the data integrity, checking the risk assessment over it, and data inventory.
Yeah.
And there is two questions that comes to mind here. The first one is when you share these claims, it means that the security token trusts you as the KYC provider, right?
Yeah.
Do you also do the risk analysis all the time? Do you also?
Yeah, for sure. So the way our risk analysis works is we do an initial AML check, and then we continually monitor the AML status of someone. So if someone's status changes, then we write that change of value onto the chain, so the transfers will start to go into the risk.
And exactly. And the second one is ERC 20 is 740. So 7 is putting claims directly on chain.
Yeah.
And in terms of privacy, how crazy is that? Like, we're talking security token, we're talking real asset with reality and reality beyond it, where you cannot do any mixing, where you cannot do any sort of privacy layer, like privacy directly. And gathering all my identity together, showing what I own is very big privacy risk all the time. And how do you know that?
So there's several ways to approach this. So like the default way that people do is ERC 20, right? But that exposes the cap table. You can see how many tokens someone owns. So we at Abacus have built a standard which basically hides like the number of shares you own in the company for security tokens. We use NFTs to represent these things, and using the same way, like I just described using some key value mapping, there's a key value mapping on these NFTs. So you could actually represent like the key would be shares granted, and the value would be the number of shares, but it would be like obscured in some way using like a hashing equivalency. I don't know if that answers.
No, it does.
Okay. Yeah.
I have two questions. So are you all like a registered KYC provider? And then my second question is like, do you see like the security token contract calling your protocol or whatever before transfer is executed? Is that kind of what you're imagining?
Yeah. So we use Untitled and compliant bands in the back end, and we're very open about that. So we don't actually have registered as a KYC provider in the US. And this, what was your second question again? Sorry.
The second question is like, do you see like the security token contract itself making a call?
Oh yeah.
Or how does that work?
Yeah. So basically, the idea is that the security token's transfer function. Within the transfer function, you have a check function of some sort, and within that check, you would call Abacus, either the on-chain API, or we actually have an off-chain API as well, where if you wanted some privacy and don't want people to know you're on like certain whitelists, you can actually perform all compliance checks off-chain. You had a question?
Yeah, my question was around, it seems like in these sort of ERCs, you end up centralizing a lot of like data checks and all that stuff. Is anyone investigating the zero knowledge proof things here? Like, how do you utilize that?
Yeah, I've looked into those a bit. I think the gas is too expensive right now for like on Ethereum. So the way we actually like obscure things is by doing off-chain compliance checks. So basically, since compliance has to be centralized in some way, right? Like you have to have the name, address, date of birth, like a lot of personal information off-chain already, right? So in theory, you're already trusting that person's attestations. You should also trust their attestations about like whether something like a transfer should be allowed or not. And that's how we're, I guess, hiding data.
A bit of technicality, but the thing in your case is you are submitting a personal identifier on chain.
Yeah.
How does that comply with GDPR?
Yeah, so in terms of GDPR, for European citizens or EU citizens, we do the opt-in compliance.
But you still need to push some authorities, like some addresses to whitelist.
We don't have to. So if the compliance is off-chain, then they would just have to contact us and we perform all the compliance and then authorize the transaction. So that's fine in terms of GDPR. So we would not actually add them to any of these standards like 735 or 780. But for US customers, which is like the majority of them, we use this system. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about the NFT badges and how you sort of make that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'll cover the last two like claim standards. So NFT badges is another one I've seen. I think Wire's doing it, and I think Alex Kern just mentioned it in his previous talk. But the idea is that if you own a certain NFT, then you are allowed to perform transfers in a token. It's basically a whitelist, but you can like put data on it on chain, and also you can like see it in your wallet. So it's like reverse compatible with like your C721 wallets out there. You have any other questions about NFT badges?
Is it transferable?
No, it's non-transferable. Yeah, so yeah. Sorry, what's that?
Depends which one.
Yeah, it depends which one, I guess.
So in that sense, you know who has access to these tokens, but you don't know how much they have. Is that?
Yeah, so the badge shows if you have access to the token or not. Like if you hold the badge, that means you can access like tokens or something issued on the person's stealing it. So I'm not really sure how Coinbase is doing it, but in the case of Wire, I believe they're just using those tokens to know who can transfer their like fiat representation on chain. Question?
The Harper example you mentioned before, the insurance platform is actually liable from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah.
You see them transfer because they're liable if there's like fraud. I don't know if there are problems. You see them transferring a key function to you guys, and then
They're transferring which function?
so they're now putting that responsibility on you, right? So and you are doing that with Untitled, and you're saying like, if I understand correctly, you're putting Untitled verification on chain.
Yeah.
Do you think that will fly?
Yeah, I think it will. So, I mean, if the issuer is liable, right, they have access to all the same information we have. We kind of proxy these APIs and can actually see all the different identity verification information, on FIDO, confided edge, verified investor information. You know exactly who you're dealing with. Yeah, I guess I could go over the
question. Yeah. So at this point, you are a KYC provider, right?
Yeah.
So my point is, what is incentive for those KYC provider to join your protocol?
Yeah, so if they want to share, I guess, liquidity of tokens, then like basically have a common witness, then that would be the benefit of the protocol.
But it also means they have to trust you and your KYC issuance. It means that you cannot create a consortium. But at this point, every banks don't even do that between themselves. So how would you convince another KYC provider to follow up with you and go that direction? Just give you one example. Like my dad's friend had some grey money. He wanted to get back to white in French system, and he had a very tremendous amount of time getting bank account accepting his money.
Yeah.
Eventually he got it. But and then when he wanted to invest in some insurance company, some insurance product, whatever, the insurance company, although the money was back in the white system, the normal system, they refused it because of the original money. And like even in the real financial world, how people don't trust each other for KYC issue. So how do you plan to make everyone work together?
Yeah, so I don't think everyone in the protocol would work together. It would just be like certain bands of people who would. So like if there's a company that we're working with and we like their KYC policy, we might share KYC information between us. We might not do everything. Maybe we'll do the AML checks on top of their AML checks because maybe ours are a little more stringent. Maybe they don't check for like politically exposed person or something, and we want to. But like the whole point, I guess, of all these standards is not that everyone who puts a claim on there will be respected by everyone else. It's more that if someone puts a claim on here, it should be compatible with anyone else that is looking at these claims. If that makes sense. Any other questions?
Is your product live or?
Yeah, so the identity verification, OAuth API, data sharing is all live. What's not live is some I guess nuances around security tokens, like how exactly we don't have any way to issue security tokens yet. Yeah. I'll go to the last claim standard, I guess, which is the Abacus protocol. It's kind of a subset of ERC 780. ERC 780 actually came out after we built that protocol. But the idea is that you have these providers of data of any sort that can attest data onto non-fungible tokens. And we actually represent our identities as non-fungible tokens internally. So you can make attestations onto tokens. For example, I was talking about the shares granted thing earlier where you might want to obscure your cap table. Or you can make attestations to an identity. So whether someone's passed for KYC checks or not. Yeah. Did I have any other slides? Okay, discussion of identity standards. Let me see my notes. I think I have other questions. Does anyone have any just general identity verification or identity in general questions about anything? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of identity platforms now like Civic and Bloom and all these other guys handling that. And how do you see all, including yourselves, all these working together? Do they work together? Does it end up being another Facebook that owns their own identity?
Yeah. So I mean, right now they don't work together. It's because there isn't really, these standards are all up for debate right now. Not everyone agrees on 725, not everyone agrees on what claim standard to use. But once these standards are, I guess, well-defined and people are all using them, then that's where people will be working together. So it really, people just need to work together for these things to be adopted.
What are your thoughts on potential business models for an identity platform? So business models, you could charge on KYC checks, you could charge on all the identity verification checks, that's one thing. The thing about that is technically the cost should go to zero if people all have the same identity verification system. So you would have to find some other business on top of this, which is what we have. So. that you have?
Yeah, so we're identity and compliance. So we also do compliance for security tokens. That's the other big thing we do.
So you're gonna, like, if someone wants to trade a security token and you're checking the total number of investors or the jurisdiction or something,
Yeah.
you're going to
On top of that,
run the transactions or how?
yeah, so that's something we're doing, and we're also going to generate documents based off of transfers. And also like any reporting that needs to be done. There's a lot of things that need to be done. People really do it. I think I guess I was going to talk about how I think identity is like the most important problem right now that needs to be solved. Because it's needed for, I guess, the real world to interact with blockchain. People are not going to deal with like anonymous, or like large banks and large funds are not going to deal with anonymous transactions because it's not legal. So identity needs to be solved before, I guess, security tokens or any other large financial use could take off. Are there any more questions anyone wanted to ask? Okay. Oh, one.
Have you guys made any efforts, or it's even on your radar, in terms of trying to link up with standard identity providers, be it governments, things like Facebook, or things like maybe Equifax or whatever, and try to incorporate that into what you're doing, or is that?
Yeah, so we use Untitled and Coinbase in the back end, and those both proxy these government data sources. The problem with like the government, like dealing with government directly, is that there's so many data sources out there. And I think in terms of like, you said Experian, right?
Yeah, or any credit.
Yeah, so
like I think all the things we're talking about today are useless if there's not some credit rating.
Oh, credit. I think credit's like a completely different story. But I mean, I think identity needs to be built for credit, and then you can in theory have like decentralized credit scoring protocols. Like I think Bloom's working on that. But yeah, it'd be great if people can tap into that stuff.
Do you have any GDPR specific concerns? Like, are there other additional, even if like what you're putting on the chain is really minimal?
Yeah. So if anyone's in the EU, we will not put their information on chain. We have an off-chain like compliant, or we have an off-chain API that people can interact with for that information.
You'll put personal information of like investors on chain.
It would just be the like whether they've gone through our KYC or game checks, booleans. It's not a PII, but it's personal data. So we still can't do that for reasons. Great. Well, that's